You're watching NewsX with me, Devika Chopra. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has announced the Pradhan Mantri Suryodaya Yojana, a government scheme under which 1 crore households will get rooftop solar power systems. However, this is not the first scheme for promoting the installation of rooftop solar power systems. In 2014, the government launched the rooftop solar program that aimed to achieve a cumulative installed capacity of 40,000 megawatts or 40 gigawatts by 2022. However, this target, while it has not been achieved, as a result of the initiative, the government extended the deadline to 2026. The Pradhan Mantri Suryodaya Yojana seems to be a new attempt to help reach this target of 40 gigawatts rooftop solar capacity. Essentially, it is a scheme that will involve installing solar power systems at rooftops for residential consumers. Solar power installed capacity in India has reached around 73.31 gigawatts as of 2023, and the target is to make it reach 500 gigawatts by 2030. India has made a lot of strides as far as solar renewable energy is concerned, but how do we translate the vision and the plans into a reality? Taking this conversation forward with me is Dr. Jayajit Bhattacharya. I also have with me Sharad Kohli on the broadcast, and we have with us Gautam Mukherjee as well. Let me begin this conversation with Jayajit Bhattacharya. Jayajit, we will be having a conversation later in the day about the exact scheme that has been launched by the Prime Minister right after his visit to the Ram Mandir in Ayodhya, where the target now is for 1 crore houses. But I'd like to understand from you, in terms of a larger picture, where exactly do we stand right now, and will we be able to achieve the targets that we've set by 2030?
Look at what we have really achieved till now. Almost 50% of our total, or rather 40% of our total electricity generation capacity is actually renewable, which is humongous. Half of that is solar. So we have actually achieved a lot in terms of solar. But let's also look at the challenges. Why is solar, especially rooftop solar, a daunting task? Is because there is no uniformity of roofs. There are levels of roofs which are at a higher level and a lower level, which means that one roof is putting a shadow on the other roof. The orientation becomes a challenge, and so on and so forth. There's basically a non-uniformity of the roofs that are there, and therefore being able to have enough insolar to be able to convert that into electricity at scale becomes a challenge. Now, even if you look at within the rooftop solar, there is institutional buildings, and then there are the regular housing buildings. So if you look at the institutional buildings, many of the buildings have actually gone ahead and put solar on the rooftop, including the airports, which again, falls under rooftop solar. So there are hospitals, government offices, airports, and so on and so forth, who have actually gone ahead and put solar on the rooftop. There still needs to be done more, at the state level, at various local government level. There still needs to be more that needs to be covered. However, if you look at the residential housing, it makes financial sense or economic sense to actually switch over to a solar panel. But that is not happening because of the challenges that I mentioned. To be able to have a distributed grid and to be able to manage it, to have panels on every single rooftop and be able to manage it, ensure that dust does not come on top of the roof, these are challenges. The other point is that even when we say that we have got about 70 gigawatts of renewable energy, out of which half is 70 gigawatts of solar energy, the solar is not operating 24 hours a day. It's not even operating 12 hours a day. It's operating about 10 hours a day, which means that to really have solar to be powering our homes, to have utility scale batteries along with it. The same batteries that goes into your EV vehicles and so on, the same batteries needs to come out into the housing and be able to capture the electricity when there is generation happening and then provide it at night, which means that the cost starts going up, and it may not be possible for everybody to do that. And therefore, one of the solutions would be that why don't we get the electricity from the grid, from the solar, and pump it back to the grid and it's a grid's responsibility to be able to save the solar energy in some kind of a battery or in some kind of a gravity-based system, which is pump up water at night during the daytime and then let the water fall on a generator during nighttime, and so on and so forth. So these are solutions that needs to evolve. There is no one shoe fit all for everybody. And given the complexity that India has, it has been a little slower progress. However, relatively speaking, when we compare ourselves with other country of this size, we have done fantastically. It's just that we need to do more because there is opportunity to do more.
Okay, Jayjit, at the same time, when you talk about rooftop solar in homes, beyond that, when we look at the potential there is in terms of public infrastructure, as you were also pointing out earlier, for public infrastructure in India, public infrastructure places in India to perhaps use solar, what exactly can you share with our viewers in terms of what has been done as maybe experimental exercises, and what really is the potential there? Are we really tapping into it? Because like you said, as far as putting it into homes is concerned, that's still a slightly more complicated and a bit more tricky. It's not that it can't be done, and it's not that there aren't homes in India right now that actually do get some of their electricity, if not all of it, from solar panel installations. But as far as other larger buildings that consume electricity on a daily, very per minute, per hour basis, when we talk about those, what really is it that you can share with us on that front?
So, there's a lot of incentives that the government had also given, and which continue in some form or the other, for generating electricity, for pumping it back into the grid. And even for a moment, if you look at residential also, there's actually a very powerful story as to why residentials have to move to solar, is because many of our villages are still not effectively connected to the grid. So if they're not connected to grid, it makes eminent sense for them to switch over to solar, which is actually what is happening. So many of the villages in better off places like Haryana and Punjab are connected to solar. If you look at the hilltops, again the same issue. It will be very expensive to stretch the grid to the hill villages, and therefore it's cheaper for the government, if not for the citizen themselves. It's cheaper for the government to actually provide solar panels than to extend the grid to these remote habitats. And therefore, there is actually a lot of economic sense to setting up a solar solution for the residential. Now, coming back to the institutional areas, the commercial cost of electricity for commercial buildings, it's pretty expensive at 8 rupees plus. It is cheaper to actually put up a solar panel and use that. It's as simple as that. You don't need to really even provide any more incentives, because there is a parity that has come in between coal-fired and solar-generated electricity, and solar is turning out to be cheaper. If you look at the costing that has come out in the tendering that happened, there has been quotations of 2 rupees per unit, whereas for solar, whereas for coal-fired power plants, it's at least 3 rupees plus, and therefore solar is turning out to be even cheaper than coal. I'm almost tempted to say that institutions should be mandated to start putting up solar panels on their rooftop, because there's absolutely no excuse for institutions for not setting up the solar panels. But however, sometimes what happens is that these buildings are not owned by any single entity. For example, if you come to, let's say, a Nehru Place in New Delhi, there are multiple buildings in this cluster. There is no one owner of those buildings. There are, the benefit of the solar panel does not accrue to one single entity. And therefore, to get all these offices and commercial entities who are in that building to be able to get benefit out of the solar panel, and therefore to rally them to invest into it, becomes a challenge. And therefore, possibly a regulatory mandate will shepherd them towards having a solar panel, which obviously in a place like Delhi is a crying need, given that solar panel does not release any CO2 or any pollutants. So a mix of a stick and a carrot is really needed at this stage, because there is no reason why institutional buildings should not have solar panels installed on top of them. In fact, I was expecting the new Parliament building to actually have their entire rooftop covered with solar.
Yes.
And that would have been a great signaling to do to the rest of the world.
Interesting. And you know, the reason why I asked this, Jayjeet, is simply because, and I'll bring in Sharad Kohli at this point as well. Sharad, the reason why I posed that question was because, like I said, yes, putting it in homes would be the ideal situation where everyone, all of us try to move towards solar as much as possible. But a lot of the homes are old. It does become a little bit tricky and complicated. But when we come out with certain schemes and policies, and when we set out the vision, it doesn't always, it seems, translate into even the basic government agencies or government buildings adopting what the government is rolling out. And the reason why I say that is, as Jayjeet pointed out, the new parliament does not seem to be powered by solar energy. Similarly, I was visiting, say, the NGMA in the national capital just the other day, and you won't believe it, they don't have UPI to buy the ticket there. I was very, very shocked that day, because this is in the heart of New Delhi. It's of course a government-owned entity, and you don't have UPI. So they're asking for either 20 bucks cash for the ticket, or you're taking out your debit or credit cards in a day and age where most of us don't even carry our wallets. So my basic premise there, Sharad, being that yes, we've now built the solar parks, and we have gone to the world and we have launched the Solar Alliance, and we've said that, listen, we all need to come in together and take this forward. But on ground, how do we actually achieve that reality? What perhaps can be a better incentivization method as far as adopting solar is concerned?
Thank you, Devika. I think to answer your question on a lighter note, I would say our Prime Minister thinks ahead. You know, as you rightly said, probably the NGMA building is not equipped with something as basic as a UPI or a QR code or whatever. You know, the Prime Minister has got a vision which is far ahead of the planning agencies, and it is then Prime Minister's vision which gradually translates into action. Now, coming back to your point and question about challenges. You know, I mean, I'll take it forward from where Jayjeet left, a very interesting case in point. I think the master plan of a town and the master plan of a city has to be aligned with this project. As Jayjeet pointed out, you know, the buildings are, you know, of different heights. So you tend to shadow the other building. I mean, there's no sunlight on some of the roofs.
Exactly. I mean, honestly, in my home in Delhi, you can't put it. You can't have solar panels because yes, because as you said, it's completely, there's just no sunlight that comes on the roof.
Yeah, because someone must be smart enough to build a couple of extra floors.
Yes.
So that prevents, in law we call it as torts. You know, somebody has blocked your probably sunlight. The other thing is that the roofs here are saleable. So because of the master plan doesn't permit you to construct, or it permits you to construct both ways. So the houses are sold as floors. I mean, now we have very, very rare, and this is becoming rarer actually, having independent houses. So having an independent house is a great incentive and makes the things feasible as far as implementation or something like Suryodaya. But the problem is that if there are 4 floors, there are 4 families living, and they are rarely, you know, friendly with each other. There is some other dispute. You know, we've seen the parking issue. It's something like sorting out a parking issue, where you have where government found out that you make a still and you park your cars inside. But there, if somebody has got 3 cars, so likewise, I put up my solar panel. If that solar panel, I use 3 ACs, somebody uses 2 ACs, somebody's got 5 ACs. So probably the distribution within the building for the solar panel will also be a complication. But for me, Devika, the bigger challenges, and which a lot of first of all, you know, we don't have an official estimate, Devika, of how many households in India are actually, because Suryodaya scheme is primarily targeting the residential. And Prime Minister said 2 things. One is he'll bring down the cost for the poor and the lower middle class and the middle class.
Yes.
Second, it will reduce our dependability on the customary power, on importing. We'll become more self-sufficient. These were the 2 prime objectives. Now, if the cost of installation of a solar panel is very high, although there are subsidies, there are incentives, but I'm sure this PM Suryodaya scheme is going to do, we are expecting the finer details. The fine print is yet to come. We all know that, Devika. But I think once these come, I'm sure either there's going to be an incentive or this would be subsidized. Another case in point is that the entire solar panel block is very bulky and huge. So we need a more, I have seen it in Europe and some of the other places in Middle East where they're using solar energy. The panels are very compact. You don't need a huge, occupying your whole terrace. So what people do is they end up wasting the terrace. I was talking to somebody in Delhi. He said, I've got a terrace which is about 2,000 square feet. And if I install a solar panel, which I need, it will occupy probably 1,000 square feet of my terrace. And I'm using that terrace for a garden, for holding parties and this and that. So the opportunity cost of using the terrace comes into picture. So more compact panel, which is less expensive, is the need of the hour. And I can bet you, Devika, that the Suryodaya scheme is going to hit this aspect, because I think the government is very well aware of these challenges. It's not something that we are thinking out of the box. These challenges are very much on the table of the higher-ups who are taking decisions. The Prime Minister came back and he held a meeting with the officials of Ministry of Power, especially renewable energy, to see as to how this can be sorted out. Because in a country like India where sunshine, there is no paucity of sunshine throughout the year. So there is the only challenge is linking it and aligning it with the master plan. The building should be aligned and made accordingly so that you are able to trap the sunlight. And then the cells, we need advancement of cells who can hold the power for that long. So on a day like this in Delhi, Devika, you are in Delhi. Look at how Delhi weather has been for the last few weeks. Sunlight on one day, no sunlight on next 3 days. So I think the solar panels have to be capable of storing the sunlight for that 1 day or 2 day a week when the power comes. Obviously linking with the grids and all that is a solution, but we heard Jayji talking about the challenges in those solutions. So I think the cells need to be advanced. If you put the tick boxes, the cells have to be advanced. They have to be more compact. A very cost-effective panel has to be there. The whole installation has to be cost-effective. And government needs to, come forward, take one more step. If you really want the poor and the middle class, the huge Indian middle class, I would say, if you really want them to come forward, I think government just needs to take one more step before people start holding the hand. About 13 to 1400 kilowatt is the per capita consumption, Devika. So it's not a very, very large amount. I mean, Indian households, all of them don't have 5 ACs or 4 ACs.
Yes.
Probably 1 AC or a couple of coolers, a fridge and a television and a few lights. I think that's all they need. So it's very, very doable. And I'm sure Prime Minister's initiative, Devika, is going to address these challenges. I have no doubt about it.
Sharad, at the same time, as you were talking, and I was also just thinking that does this then also present an opportunity to the people in the country to perhaps now come up with some of the solutions that you were talking about, that we need to make the solar panels more compact? And I'm sure there's a lot of R&D and work that's already happening to that extent. But is there something that then needs to be done to maybe accelerate that R&D, to maybe take it forward and give some incentives to people who maybe want to become solar panel manufacturers, people who want to work on specifically rooftop installations in cities and, in homes and people's houses?
Well, the best solution to your question, Devika, very interesting question, I must say. But, on both sides of the table, Devika, one is the consumers and the other is the researchers, people who are involved in researching and, upgrading the technology. The answer lies in a very old saying in English, which we say on a lighter note. It's all about money, honey. If you incentivize, if you make it more profitable, and you explain to the household that, look, if you invest 1 lakh today, you're able to recover your cost in the next 2 years or 2.5 years, then I certainly do not mind. And same goes for the researchers. If a researcher is putting in 6 months or 3 months in bringing out a solution or an innovation, and you tell him that we are going to reward you, you're going to get a lifetime of an award or probably some kind of compensation, I'm sure. So the answer lies in incentivizing it and monetizing it. I think in India, if you want something to move really quickly, you announce a reward, announce some kind of money, and you see how quickly it moves. I'm sorry, I'm sounding very commercial, but that's how the way things run here, Devika.
Right. Gautam Mukherjee, bringing you into the conversation, when we, just on the same note, like I said, there will now have to be a larger ecosystem for solar energy that is in place. What do you feel can be done in terms of incentives that can be offered to people who are working in this sector already? Because like I said, there is no dearth. If tomorrow I wanted to install a solar panel into my home, I can just Google it, and today there are lots of companies that are doing it. But there is still not enough clarity as to how that will work. In places like Delhi, where Sharad was pointing out, there's not enough sun. There's also pollution that plays a big role as far as harnessing solar energy is concerned. You need an absolutely clear sky. There will, like I said, have to now be a very rapid ecosystem building. If something goes wrong in my solar panel, who am I calling? Who's coming to fix it? Because as far as electricity is concerned, I mean, you know, we're so used to it. You just call up the electrician and he comes and he fixes the wire. Or, of course, there are government agencies that are supplying electricity, so they come and fix it. But if my solar panel, something goes wrong and something's not working, there's a short circuit, anything of that nature happens, who am I calling? So like I said, what do you feel can be done to then really rapidly develop an ecosystem that has not just people who are doing the R&D, not just people who are manufacturing and setting it up, but also have the ability to help you out on a very real day-to-day basis to look after your solar panel needs?
Well, Devika, amongst the people I know, very few have actually put this in. And while the initial costs are a little bit high, solar panels do need maintenance. They have to be cleaned. You need battery sets and all the rest of it. Now, if you compare that with, a South Delhi reasonably well-off person's electricity bill, it works out to about 4 lakhs or so a year. In terms of electricity bills, maybe 30,000 or so in the summer and much less in the winter, so it evens out. To put in even a rudimentary system to take care of that kind of consumption will cost you upwards of 10 lakhs with all the incentives. Getting it back in due course is the same fallacy as buying a diesel car at a higher price and saying, you see, actually are getting it back because of the differential in cost between petrol and diesel. Except that the government changed all that and there was hardly any differential between the two. I think where Prime Minister Modi is coming from is the fact that we now make about 60% of the solar panels in India. In other words, we're not buying loads and loads of solar panels from China and putting them up and saying we're making this many gigabytes of electricity from it. Now, if 1 crore households, and I would imagine what he's really thinking of when he looks at a place like Ayodhya, which is being totally renewed and a lot of new housing is going in, is to attack places which are being built afresh right now, like many of the housing colonies that the government is building and paying loans, giving loans to people to buy their own houses. Those are reasonably uniform in terms of what Dr. Bhattacharya was saying. And you can put them in at the outset. There is also usually quite a lot of land, which is not that expensive. You can build a bank of these things, if not on top of your roof, then close by, and then electrify the houses from there. As far as storing it for the nighttime, even if that doesn't happen, and you get half the time, the daylight hours, you get solar electricity, I think that's still a plus. And just like hybrid cars, where you can run it sometimes on fuel and sometimes on battery, there is no harm done if you can halve your fuel costs. In the cities, I think it's penny wise and pound foolish to get into all that. As another panelist and you yourself were saying, now I have I live in a house which is 3 stories high, But on both sides, they have now built 4-story houses on stilts. So my sunlight is gone except for the direct sunlight that comes onto the roof till about 12:01, and then it goes west. My house faces more or less southeast, and that's the end of that. So such problems will exist in densely packed cities. It can also happen, I would imagine, in these new high-rise condominium estates, walled developments, where you can incorporate some of this right from the start. Now, in my experience, they don't particularly work. Sometimes people at the building stage do put it in, and then at the RWA stage, it doesn't function. And the demands are forever going up in each of the flats. So it is, I think, directed at the people who have simple needs, which are basically rural folk, and like he said, poor folk,
Yes.
lower middle class folk, in maybe not even the tier 2, but 4 or 5 towns and villages where something like this can be executed with a lot of government help. There we go.
Absolutely. At the same time, then maybe a little bit of, like I said, education and perspective change would also be required on the part of the people that now have to take the decisions, to take the vision forward for it. Jayjeet, I'll just leave the last thought with you. Even as far as EVs are concerned, a lot of people say that the reason why we don't want to invest in an EV is because ultimately, where is the electricity coming from? Your electricity is coming from coal. So if the electricity to power the EV is not clean, then what really becomes the point? That's an argument that's being used by a lot of people nowadays, to just say that till the time the power is not clean itself, we're not really interested in switching to an EV. What is it, Jayjeet, that can be done perhaps for us to maybe also educate ourselves a little bit more, and for the perspective to maybe change, so that we also look a little bit more positively towards adopting some of these things that we know are the future? Eventually, yes, ideally people will have a lot of their energy needs met through renewable sources.
Yeah, so this argument that is put together that the EV car is actually not that clean because the electricity is coming from a coal source and therefore we should not use it.
Yeah.
It's a bit fallacious, because moving to EV provides a pathway to possibly getting clean energy on an end-to-end basis. If you are using ICE engine, then you will never ever have clean energy which will power your engine. And so when you move to EV, then the mix of electricity that you're getting, and you just saw, you have the statistics, 40% of the energy in India is now renewable, out of which almost half is solar energy in terms of the installed capacity. So on an average, if you're taking 10 units of power to charge your car, about 4 units is clean energy, which is better than what you're having right now. And as we move forward and we see the government's vision and the Prime Minister's vision getting rolled out in terms of more and more renewable energy coming in, we'll pretty soon see that our EVs are running on completely clean green electricity. So it's just a matter of time. It's both economics and the push by the government that's going to accelerate the adoption of solar power and of other forms of renewable energy, including wind, because some of these farms, the solar farms, needs to be hybrid, because it needs to have wind energy as well as solar energy to be able to make it even more economically viable, right? So those factors starts coming in. So there'll be a mix of electricity or energy sources coming in. There will be obviously hydrogen in a big way coming in, which is again being pushed by this government. So solar is one aspect of it, a very critical aspect being pushed by the government. All other renewable energies are also extremely critical. And again, they're being pushed with that kind of criticality and alacrity by the government. which is where you will see large amounts of investment coming in from the large corporate houses in this country in both solar and in hydrogen. So I think it's up to us to start moving towards a supply chain of energy where at least at the end point, we should start adopting devices and gadgets and vehicles which actually provide us the pathway towards having a completely clean energy supply chain. And therefore, EV fits in very well. And we already use electricity, and we are moving away from the normal chula to Unnat chula to now cooking gas, and LPG is being used everywhere.
Yes.
So that's the evolution path that is happening.
Absolutely. And that was also a process, right, to make people move through the process. And it took a very long time. Gautam Mukherjee, I'll leave the last word with you, because as we're having this conversation, another interesting thought strikes my mind. As Sharad was also pointing out earlier, that there are already countries, when we talk about making compact solar panels, there are already, of course, countries that have that technology, that have made it to that point. How crucial then it becomes for us to also then encourage the younger people in this country, and I'm not just talking about people who are, in startups or entrepreneurs, but from a very young age, people in college or school, to push them into perhaps pursuing studies in some of these countries, having some sort of, country agreement of sorts where you can send students abroad to educate them, and where they can learn the technical expertise and bring it back to India?
Well, in terms of tiny solar panels, I was watching a documentary on one of the TV channels where roof tiles in those countries where they have sloped roofs because of snow, each roof tile, the solar panel comes more or less the same size and acts as a roof tile. It was in Germany, and so one way to answer your question would be to just collaborate with these people. Why reinvent the wheel? The other is, if they dare to put in solar panels in Germany where they do not have much sun, they have a lot of snow and what have you, rainfall, then over here, those things should really work. Now, how expensive they would be, what their composition is, etc., needs to be gone into. But like all technology, it keeps progressing. Some of it falls by the wayside, like Sony Betamax and VHS, that contest. And after a while, perfectly good Betamax fell by the wayside. Similarly, in solar and in other renewables, you keep getting better and better product to generate as well as, buy, store, the competitiveness goes up and so on.
Right.
To what extent people will adopt it is an economic question. If it is cheap enough and hassle-free enough, people will adopt it. If you've got to put up huge, great panels that look ugly, somebody said, why? Jaideep said, that why isn't it on top of Parliament? I shudder to think it's a nice looking building. You don't want to put those wretched things on top of it.
Right, absolutely. So on that lighter note, I mean, it is an important conversation, but I'm going to probably have to end it on that lighter note, and hopefully it is through these conversations the message might reach out to some of the young entrepreneurs and people who are constantly figuring out in this country what is next that they can work on and what are the industries that they can join. Definitely solar is a part of the future, especially in India and also in the rest of the world. I thank all of our panelists for joining us on this broadcast.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.